I'm Lauren Smith, Chief Marketing Officer at Caxton, the travel card, and I'm thrilled to be back with George Jerjian as we continue his remarkable journey around the world in 80 days. So far, we've travelled through South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, three powerful chapters that have each offered their own lessons on purpose, freedom, and reinvention in retirement. And today we're heading to Japan, where centuries-old traditions, vibrant cities, and moments of deep reflection come together in another unique part of the journey. If you're just joining us, George is a retirement coach, a speaker, and author of The Dare Method, also releasing a book, Odyssey of an Elder, about all of these trips coming out soon, and we'll touch on that at the end. He's also someone who was told at 52 that he only had 6 months to live. And that moment sparked a profound rethinking of what retirement and even life can be. Thankfully, the doctors were wrong. George is here with us today, and he spent the years since helping others turn retirement into time of discovery, energy, and meaning. Welcome back, George. Shall we continue in Japan?
Yes. Hi, Lauren. Great to be on your show.
Fantastic. So here we are, trip 3, Japan. How did Japan make it to the list when there are so many countries there to choose from?
That's a really good question. I think one of the priorities I had in selecting which country I went to was that it had to be a country that I'd never visited before. And Japan fell into that. China and India were ones that were, I'd been to China, so that disqualified it, but India was a possibility. But India is so huge. With 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you can barely see, one little aspect of India. So I thought, I can't rush India, so I'm going to leave that for another time. But for the purposes of this trip, Japan won by a huge distance, because I'd always been intrigued by Japanese culture, and the samurai and all that stuff as a kid. But also, when I was still at boarding school, my parents went on a round the world trip back in the 1970s, and one of the places they went was Japan. And when I was at school, I received a postcard with a bullet train on it.
Cool.
And so you can imagine the conversations at school about this bullet train that none of my friends had seen either. So, it's something that stays with you. And I thought, I do want to go and see Japan. And that's why I chose it. And of course, because Japan is not such a small place, my travel agent sort of helped me to eliminate the non-essentials so I could focus on going and seeing what I wanted to see.
It looks like you've actually covered quite a lot of ground. Just discussing the size of Japan, how big is it? Is it about the same size as the UK, or?
Yes, Japan is about the size of the UK, and it's also the size of New Zealand. Oh, yes. And give or take. But I think New Zealand has a population of 5 million people. The UK has a population of 65 or 70 million. And Japan is 130 million people.
Right.
So, it's hugely overpopulated for the size of the country. But I covered a lot, but there was lots of places I didn't make it to.
Of course. Well, what surprised or impressed you the most about Japanese culture as you experienced it firsthand?
I think 2 words jump out for me. One is discipline. They're incredibly disciplined people, as a culture even. And that's a word actually which I hated when I was growing up. Discipline and authority was something I deeply detested. But I think as one ages, one sees that there's a good side to discipline that we threw out with the baby with the bathwater. But discipline is hugely important. And so I recognize the value of it in Japanese culture and what we can learn from them. But the other thing is about their politeness. They're incredibly polite people. And Let me just give you one example. I traveled a great deal by train because that's the only way to travel around Japan economically and effectively in the time that one has. And every rail journey, the conductors in the train would enter the compartment, bow, literally perpendicular bow,
Oh,
and then move down the train, the compartment. At the end of the compartment, they turn around, do another bow before they leave. On the
I think
street,
I'd
if
like to
I'm
send
lost,
my children to Japan.
well, it's a real eye opener from that part, you know. And the thing is, I think when you go to Japan, don't try to compare. Comparison is the thief of joy. Don't compare. Accept it as a very different culture and enjoy it for what it is.
Amazing. Well, shall we get started in Tokyo? Tokyo is where you landed. Remembering that we've just flown directly from New Zealand, we should just quickly cover around how you got there from New Zealand. You were in the South Island, I believe, finishing up there. I don't
Yeah.
take it there's a direct flight from the bottom of the South Island from Tokyo. Did you go back up to
No.
Wellington, or how did you get there?
No, I flew from Queenstown in the South Island directly back to Auckland, stayed overnight in an airport hotel, and got a very early flight, sort of 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, from Auckland to Brisbane to get a connecting flight, Qantas flight to Tokyo.
And that's not unusual because quite a few flights from New Zealand do connect via Australia, just to pick up more passengers, I think.
I think there's not enough people leaving and coming into New Zealand to warrant sort of long distance flights. Yeah, that's probably the reason.
So tell us about Tokyo. So I guess it's just a box ticking, or was it special? What was going on in Tokyo?
Very much box ticking, because what I wanted to see was not major cities with all the same shops and stuff like that. And Tokyo is a huge place. You could spend 3 weeks and still get lost. 36 million people. I mean, I wanted to see it. I did see it for a couple of days. I saw the essential places to see, but I got out of there as quickly as possible to go to where I wanted to go, which is the
I can imagine that they would try and attract the tourist with things that were more tourist oriented things, as opposed to being, deeply moving cultural experiences.
Yeah, but also you wouldn't find those deeply cultural places in a city. That's the thing, though. It's always out in nature, isn't it? But I mean, the cities were interesting, the department stores and all that sort of stuff, and the temples and whatever. But that was not my scene.
Yeah, amazing. So you move on then to the Kiso Valley. Where is that? What is it? How'd you get there?
Okay, again, trains. Everywhere I went in Japan was with trains. But to Kiso Valley, I had to take 3 different trains. I took a bullet train, which you can see in the second photograph there. And they're incredible trains even now after 50 years. They're still incredibly futuristic. I took that, I think it was an hour and a half, and then I got onto an express train and then onto a local train. And the Japanese trains put the Swiss trains to shame in terms of punctuality. When you're coming off at the station, you need to be prepared to alight immediately. If you're still packing your bags, the train's moving on. You'll miss your destination.
My goodness.
They will stop for no one. Timing is crucial. So
the bullet train thing, though, because I've always heard about these, and actually I didn't realize that they are 50 years old. But that is incredible. I mean, what makes a bullet train? Is it the speed, and also where do they go? Is it that they have to cover really long distances, and that makes it the bullet train because they go really fast between those 2 bar destinations, or how do they classify them?
From major cities and major towns. I'd say major cities. In Japanese, they call them Shinkansen. And they travel from the major cities. And then when you want to go from a major city to a town, you take an express train. Okay. And then from the towns, I guess, to villages, you probably take the local train. Okay. Which are obviously slower. They're not quite the same, but they're still super efficient. So I went to the Kiso Valley to go on the Nakasendo Trail, which is a 500-year-old idea and journey done by pilgrims in Japan, not dissimilar to the El Camino in Spain, where people went on pilgrimages. And this was fascinating because, again, 500-kilometer is the range of this Nakasendo Trail. A lot of the paths have now turned into express highways and so on, so they're lost. But I went to the most beautiful part of the Nakasendo Trail, which is from Tsumago to Magome, which is about 8.5 kilometers. And it's this kind of scene that you see here. It's pure nature. There's water everywhere, not just here in Nakasendo, but in Japan. Even in cities, you have where in other places you would have gutters on the side of the street. They actually have fresh water coming from the mountains on the side of the roads.
Oh, like
and
decoration.
you'd never see people throwing cigarettes and butt ends or stuff like that in there. In fact, in Japan, there's no place to take rubbish anywhere. You got to go home and take your rubbish back home.
Oh, and people do, of course.
And people do, of course. Yeah. So the Nakasendo Trail was a fascinating journey for me.
You did walk part of it then?
I did. I walked 8.5 kilometers.
8.5
It was
kilometers.
actually 69 post office towns from Kyoto to Tokyo, the old royal capital of Kyoto, to Tokyo, which was called Edo at the time. So again, fascinating thing. Lots of temples, lots of post office towns. Wonderful.
Amazing. And I don't even want to have a turn at pronouncing some of these names. Can you help me out where you went here next?
Yes, I went to Kanazawa, again, by train. I think it was 2 trains. And Kanazawa is sort of an old city town. It's an old sort of castle city, and run by a feudal lord in the old days. And this is where I met our samurai expert. I'd asked to meet a samurai expert, and my travel agent managed to find not just a samurai expert, but a man who is descended from a samurai from 600 years ago. And he pulled out his the lineage out and showed me, and I discovered later on when I was studying a little bit of the history of Kanazawa that his great grandfather, ancestor, whatever, was actually the eyes of the shogun in this town. So he was checking on the local warlord. Fascinating stories. And I got a session of watching him do some sword fighting. Showed me the most incredible swords, 500-600 years old. The way they've been made is just staggering. And the swordsmithing was incredible. I can't go into details now because of time, but I don't know if you can play that that video there, if you're able to.
Yeah. So this is something that you learned sort of in a little bit of a session with them?
He just showed me how to actually allow. Yes, he showed me how to allow the sword to hiss like a snake. Oh. It's remarkable.
As it comes out?
As he strikes. His wife had done had kept a tatami mat in water overnight, because human body is 75% water. So the tatami mat represents the human body. And he pulled out one of his sharpened samurai swords and sliced the tatami mat into 3 with a hissing sound. It was phenomenal.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a wonderful day with the samurai guy.
Oh, that's incredible. So then it was on to Osaka, I guess by train again, because it sounds like.
Yes, it's always by train. It wasn't far. Again, Osaka is another. A lot of these big cities have their castles, so you can also see the historic connection of how Japan was put together in a feudal system, and the castles were the sort of the center point. But in Osaka, it's the food capital of Japan,
It's
That's why
definitely
I
up
went
my
to
street.
Osaka.
I'm already hungry just looking at these delicious window of treats. I guess there was lots of this all over Japan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even in you go to a shopping mall, and there are people preparing foods. I mean, I stopped at one place and had Wagyu beef skewered and prepared right there in front of me with wasabi sauce.
Oh, yeah.
It was just pure delight.
And they eat very like small, right? They're just little
They do.
things.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I found it bizarre that I never saw one obese person in Japan.
Really?
I
Oh,
mean,
what about
throughout
the
Japan.
what are those fellows called that do the big fighting? The
The sumo wrestlers.
oh, the sumo wrestlers.
Yeah, well, they're a very specific breed. I mean, they are meant to grow big. It's
Yeah.
again, it's a discipline thing, but that's their thing. But
And the
other
genetics,
than
maybe. Yeah.
sumo wrestlers, you will not. Well, if you do find anybody who's obese, they will not be Japanese. Let me tell you.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And
Amazing.
I put it down to the fact that they have such variety of foods, and
Okay.
they're so pleasing to the eye that once you've actually had a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you feel quite full.
Yeah. Is
And
it like because the diet, I mean, obviously there's rice, but actually it's quite high protein as well. And I guess sometimes with the Wagyu beef, a good amount of fat. So you're getting all of those macro foods that you sort of need in small bits at a time, maybe fill you up.
They do.
Sooner.
And I think also it's the approach to food that they have. So, for example, normally I would not eat horse. It's, but because of this trip and because I went into it with intention as a beginner, learning, I want to learn. I don't want to go in with preconceived ideas. I was open to trying out food. So in South Africa, I tried I think they're called kudo. That's an antelope. I tried antelope, game, different types.
And then
In Japan, I'm sorry?
And so it was horse in Japan, was it? This is like a regular thing that they eat. Is it?
Well, in Nagiso, in the Kiso Valley, I was staying at a Japanese ryokan, which is it's like a Japanese inn. They don't have beds; they have futons. And when you sit down and eat, the chairs and the tables don't have legs, so you are sitting. Okay, and it wasn't doing my pelvis and my back was hurting because I'm not used to sitting that way to eat. But I had, food put in front of me, which was very interesting food, and I tried and enjoyed more. There were two things that kind of pulled me back a bit, but I thought the horse sashimi was interesting because horse sashimi is effectively like sliced meat, cold meat, like bresaola or a parma ham.
Okay.
But
Right.
it's
Cured.
cured. It's
Okay.
a slice. And so they had that. And I thought, I can't have come all the way here not to try this. I've really got to push.
Did you
I've got
like
to
it?
Do you know, it didn't taste bad.
Did you eat it by itself or did you put it on a sandwich? I mean, I guess they don't have sandwiches,
but in Japan, they don't actually have bread.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's probably another reason why people don't put on weight.
Yes.
They don't, and so there's no bread and butter. So you've got all this good food, but they had horse entrails.
Oh.
And I thought, no, that's a bridge too far for me. I couldn't do that. But people used to eat everything, including, as I'll tell you a story about the chicken afterwards. But let's move on. Sorry.
So I don't say this. Hiroshima is next, and this must have been quite a solemn part. And this obviously connects what I recognize, and we discussed when we were talking about Australia. Some of these things that you're doing, you're sort of like picking up generational things. Of course, Hiroshima saw the end of the World War II. The bomb was dropped in 1945. I mean, what is it like now, a generation or two later?
Right. I mean, obviously, it's a city that's resurrected itself. But one of the reasons I chose Hiroshima in Japan was because I help retirees find a new beginning. And as a coach and a mentor, I wanted to understand the place of suffering and how that can either destroy us or make us stronger. So back in South Africa with Mandela, a man stays in jail for 27 years and emerges without rage, anger, resentment, revenge. He's transcended that. And that's what I went in for. I didn't go in for the political side of things. I went in to see how an individual manages to transcend suffering. And Hiroshima was another example. I wanted to know how the Japanese transcended this painful incident in their history. Other nations have been obliterated. They still carry a torch, possibly even 3-4 generations on. But the Japanese have forgiven and moved on, which is quite a remarkable thing to do.
It is.
And so Hiroshima was, I went into the museum, and after about 7-8 stories, I just couldn't take it anymore. It was too overwhelming.
I definitely have.
We're talking about, I'd also read the book Hiroshima by John Hersey, who'd written this book through the lives of 6 individuals who survived it. And that was like 20 years ago. So I was going in, but with a different intention and different angle.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible story of which I can't relate it, but it's about a Japanese soldier who saves a Japanese woman after the bomb fell, and she was carrying her dead child. And it's an amazing story, but we don't have time to talk about it. But it's the humanity of, for 35 years, that woman was looking for this boy, this soldier, this 16-year-old boy who saved her by, I don't know if I can't really go into this.
This is the sort of thing that you've gone into a little bit more detail in the book, right? Which
yes,
is coming
I
out
have.
in July. Yeah. So we get to hear or read in the book all of these more detailed stories and,
totally,
how you found some of that peace.
Yeah, I think it's just remarkable how, the things you can learn from the Japanese or from any other culture if you go in with humility. And in Japan, the one word I used a lot was sumimasen, which is, I'm sorry. That immediately gets their attention.
Okay.
Sumimasen. That immediately gets their attention. They will do anything. They will stop. And it's because you go in with humility. You're going into a different culture, and you don't take things for granted. So it was a great place to learn things from that wonderful position, as opposed to going in arrogantly, we know everything, we're better than you. Really? It's just interesting.
So Kyoto is next, and we're talking temples and beaches.
Well, I went to so many temples that I think the word I used was I was temple boarded as opposed to waterboarded. It was way too many.
They felt the same then after a little while. Be selective if you're going to choose temples. Is that a recommendation?
Definitely. But it's one of the things that the Japanese have a lot of. But what's interesting about the Japanese is that they have 2 religions, Shinto and Buddhism. And Buddhism is all about rules. It's about regulations. It's about doing things in a specific way. And Shinto is the old natural religion. But they have no churches, they have no scripture, they have nothing. It's all word of mouth. And it's interesting how they were able to integrate 2 contradictory religions, and they accept it. They all live with it. It's fascinating.
Wow.
And they have thousands of statues.
Just right here, they've got thousands.
They do, and they built thousands of them, and each statue represents something, a human problem. So even when they go and say, they go and say their prayers, they have to buy these plywood sticks where you can write your problem, and there's a god to pray to for that problem. So the priests make some pretty. I mean, the Catholic Church can learn from the Japanese.
Need a few more gods.
You need, but it's interesting that the faith people have it doesn't really matter what religion you have. If you've got faith, you can actually make things happen
Yes.
with or without the priests.
Interesting.
You can make it happen. And that's what I learned from this, which was fascinating. So Kyoto, again, fascinating place, has its and it was the former capital of Japan. So as you can see in the second photograph, that's just the entrance to the castle. It's huge.
A beautiful arch in its whole
It's a
self,
beautiful
isn't
arch,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
is that gold? Real
it's all
gold?
gold. It's all gold
Yes.
plated, and it's but it's fascinating artwork everywhere. And the
Very
Golden
detailed.
Temple,
yeah,
and the Golden Temple there is also one of them. I think that was probably one of the most beautiful temples that I've seen in Japan. But it's also a living monastery where the Buddhist monks, they have an abbot, and they literally, it's a living one. It's not just historical. And that's just the abbot's garden with a heron in it, as you can see on the picture. So Kyoto was very interesting, very different. As a capital city, it's more beautiful than Tokyo, but it's less commercial as well.
Okay. All right. Oh, lovely. That's from the castle, is it?
That's the that's the panoramic view from the castle, which a lot of these castles had moats with an outer wall and an inner wall.
Yep. And this is quite a recognizable tree, I think, you know, the way they grow. It looks like they're like a giant bonsai or something.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, there were so many trees I didn't even know the names of, and you can't even begin to start unless that's your specialty.
And then on to Koyasan. I have got saying that one. More temples.
Yes, Koyasan is Mount Koya. It's high up in the mountains, and if we go back, Lauren, for a second, I wanted to stay in a monastery for a couple of days to regroup myself, and this is why I chose to go to this monastery. There's 117 temples, and only 50 of them have accommodation for guests. But this one was selected for me, and so I attended fire ritual, where you sort of you burn away the things you don't want in your life, which I thought was interesting. You know, the ritual is fascinating because something actually does happen when you burn things away.
69, 70 years of age, and on this trip, did you burn something? Did you have something to burn, or were you?
Yes. I burnt a few things. I did burn a few, and I attended the fire ritual, which is interesting. And I went to the temple, had attended one of the ceremonies, but I also spent a Sunday, a rainy Sunday, journaling and meditating, and that was incredibly productive. And again, I explain that in the book. So you know, here I am, very monk-like, as you can see. The thing on the left was being taught how to meditate properly, and on the right was the
it's a real
food,
skill,
which I would
isn't
be
it?
served.
You have to learn it.
It's all vegetarian food in the monastery. So, you know, 3 days of eating vegetarian food was a discipline. But again,
after the Wagyu beef with the wasabi sauce.
No, when I went back to Osaka again for some Wagyu beef after 3 days of being a vegetarian. And that was a scene in the temple, inside the temple, sitting down on the last photograph there. And let's move to the next one. Okay, yes, Osaka. Yeah. Now here, I went to a place called Yakitori Zen, which had grilled skewered meats. And this is the chef, sous chef, and the waitress having a picture with me at the end of the meal, which was a glorious meal. They really do skewered meats beautifully. Amazing. Very clean, surgical, and very tasty.
And delicious.
And this is again a picture from Osaka Castle. You can see the moat. So it's old Japan with new Japan. It's
terrific. And then the famous Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji, of course, has been in the headlines a little bit because of the over-tourist population. It wasn't that long that you were there. I mean, what was it really like? I mean, from that perspective as well.
Okay, not easy to get there.
Oh,
But when I got there, I went to this hotel, which had a view of Mount Fuji, which was fascinating. But Mount Fuji is very challenging because a lot of people go there for 2-3 days, and it's possible they may not have a sighting of Mount Fuji because it's hidden behind clouds and so on. In
the
fact,
fog and yes,
in
okay.
fact, the hotel I was in back in the, I don't know, in the 80s, John Lennon had gone there with Yoko Ono. And for 3 days, they waited for the clouds to disperse so he could get a view of Mount Fuji, which he never did. So he drew a cartoon of it, and it's framed in the hotel lobby. But I was very fortunate. I got 3 days of Mount Fuji in all its colors and formats. And I went round the lake, the Kawaguchi Lake, a 20-kilometer ride from where you get different perspectives of the Mount Fuji. It's really
On a
quite
bicycle.
beautiful. Quite beautiful.
On a bicycle, was it, or you walked around the lake?
I walked around the lake, and I took the bus sometimes in between different
Oh, I
places.
see.
And I took it's called a ropeway up to the top where you get a different view of Mount Fuji. But it's mountains are very spiritual in a lot of cultures, and it's because they are storage of water, and water is life, and that's why they're venerated. And as I said, a lot of water in Japan.
Oh, yes, of course, with all the islands. I mean, I do love this picture. It's one of my personal favorites from your trip, actually. In a kimono journaling.
Yes, I went into character everywhere.
Absolutely, I love it.
I put on different kimonos. In fact, it took me a long while to find a secondhand kimono because they are much better than the new ones. And they have paintings inside the kimono.
Does this look more like cotton or something as opposed to like satin or something, which I don't know?
No, most of these in the hotel rooms are obviously cotton, but I bought myself a silk one, which had a painting inside of a village scene, and it was secondhand. And it took a while for me to find it. I found it in Kyoto, tried everywhere else, didn't find anything I liked. So yeah, the kimonos are really quite beautiful, and they put you in a certain state of mind.
Amazing. So you finished up the trip in Mount Fuji. I do have a question, actually. Someone's asked me to ask you. I don't know. We never sort of covered this. Did you try any vending machine surprises in Japan? There is a rumor that in Japan you can get just about anything from a vending machine.
That is true. That is true. They have vending machines everywhere. But I actually avoided any vending machines. I don't know. I didn't think. I always find that vending machines, you don't know what you're getting at the other end of this. You're far better off buying
but they were
something
definitely there.
Yeah, oh gosh, everywhere. I'm actually trying to think. No, I don't think I did. But yeah, I'm sorry.
You did cover last week as well that you were very good about not purchasing things because you weren't taking baggage and whatnot with you as well. So that's
the temptation to buy things along the way is so strong.
Yes.
But I avoided it like the plague.
I mean, you're collecting stuff here, not in your bags, and here,
Yes,
right?
I'm collecting experiences, not goods.
Yeah. Another one about the bowing. Are you supposed to bow back? Did you bow back, or?
I did. I mean, I actually quite enjoyed bowing to people. There's a sort of it gives you a sense of I am worthy. It's bizarre. It's and I think what it is because I think there's an element of kindness. Now, I'm not saying that the Japanese are all kind people because they're culturally trained to be like this, but I find as a non-Japanese, showing respect to people gives you a certain sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
Because you're showing worth to somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting thing.
So finally, I mean, just give us some practical tips while we sort of finish up, because I mean, I assume you didn't speak the language. So how did you get around Did everyone speak English, or but you went to lots of cities? What was that like?
Okay. Remarkably, not a lot of Japanese speak English. I think in obviously in the hotels and restaurants they do, but in the street when you stop people and ask them, they don't know. But thankfully, my iPhone, I downloaded Google Translate, so I would type in English what I wanted, and it would show the Japanese in writing, or you could do it phonetically, audio.
Vocally, yeah,
But
audio,
I
yeah.
quite like the writing bit. I write it out because I know what I'm writing, and then I show the Japanese to the person. Like, for example, I used to get lost quite a bit, as you'd imagine. I can't read Japanese signs, so I would show this to
The signs.
someone, and they'd go, oh, and not only would they tell me, but they would actually come with me and show me where it is. They would go out of their way. And obviously Google Maps, incredibly helpful in most places. And I would just say, just make sure that you do have Wi-Fi of some
Okay. A
kind,
SIM card,
because you can't really get around. Well, I mean, you could, but you've got to forget about making things on time, because you won't have time. And I was on a time thing, so I had to move around. But
and we're on a time thing too, George. So just tell me, because we did touch on that you do go a little bit more into the detail. So if one is to pre-order your book, and you've got some special gifts if you do pre-order the book, when they read the book, how much more in depth do you go into this trip to Japan in the book?
Oh, crikey. It's so much deeper, because, with 30 minutes, you're covering the whole country. I had 3 weeks, and I was able to get most of the material, not just the outward journey, but also the internal journey. So, I think travel opens us up, not just on the outside, but also on the inside. And in the book, I would say it's probably 60%, 50, 60% outside material, but also 40% on reflection and the inner journey that a retiree would be thinking about.
Well, we're going to post. Well, they should be thinking about. That's right. So the other thing, of course, that we've got to post on the event on Facebook and via email, if you've signed up, is your course, which will help people do some of that reflection through their retirement. But of course, this was leg 4 of a 5-leg trip. And next week, we're finishing up with Rupert. We'll be back with you, taking us through Canada. Can't wait.
Yes, that's going to be exciting. Thanks, Lauren. Thank you.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you same time next week.
Thank you.